Herald. This morning's reading is brought to us by a grant from the Omaha Association of the Blind. We have our excellent readers on board with us today, so let's welcome in now Don and Mollahan and Deb Amy. Good morning.
Good morning, Paul. Good morning, Deb.
Good morning.
And good morning, listeners. It's April 19th today, and Paul is absolutely correct. Deb and I are going to read all the news that we can fit in from the Omaha World Herald today for the next 2 hours, along with the death notices and funeral arrangements from the Lincoln Journal-Star. And we're going to begin with national and international news. And I'm going to begin with an article about the U.S. troops getting closer to the Iraqi front lines. President Barack Obama's approval of Pentagon efforts to intensify the U.S. effort in Iraq may matter less for the small contingent of troops being added than for the decision to allow them closer to the front lines of the war against the Islamic State. Obama has agreed to send 217 more U.S. troops, bringing the authorized total to 4,087, and to let them embed at the battalion level, a step closer to the fighting than previously, Captain Jeff Davis, a Defense Department spokesman, told reporters at the Pentagon on Monday. In addition to advising Iraqi forces, the Americans will provide force protection, fire support, and aviation support, Davis said. The U.S. will send 8 Apache helicopters that for the first time will join the fight against the Islamic State. They will aid in the coming battle to retake Mosul, and Islamic State stronghold, Defense Secretary Ashton Carter told troops during a visit to Baghdad. At the White House, the challenge was to describe the moves as a significant step, but not one that undermines Obama's pledge that he won't embroil U.S. ground forces in sustained combat in Iraq. This has to be a fight that is led by local forces, White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest told reporters. The moves were announced after Secretary Carter had an opportunity to confer with Iraqi government officials on backing their efforts, he said. What was announced today were ideas for intensifying that support in a rather tangible way, but it does not change the basic elements of the strategy, Earnest said. The decision was deemed inadequate by Senator John McCain, chairman of the Armed Services Committee. McCain, a Republican from Arizona, has long pressed Obama to send more U.S. troops and authorize them to play a more direct role in fighting the terrorist group. Last June, the Obama administration announced that hundreds of troops would be deployed to help the Iraqis retake Ramadi, a goal they accomplished at the end of the year. Obama on Monday emphasized that the additional troops won't be doing the fighting, but that the extra training and intelligence support they provide can continually tighten the noose. As we see the Iraqis willing to fight and gaining ground, let's make sure we're providing them more support, Obama said in an interview with CBS that aired Monday evening. Obama also predicted success in Mosul. My expectation is that by the end of the year, we will have created the conditions whereby Mosul will eventually fall. Of the additional troops announced Monday, most would be Army Special Forces who have been used throughout the anti-Islamic State campaign to advise and assist the Iraqis. The remainder would include some trainers, security forces for the advisors, and maintenance teams for the Apaches. Carter asked in Iraq whether putting U.S. troops closer to combat will add to the risk of casualties, told reporters, "We have troops at risk here in Iraq right now, every day." But he said the forces would receive adequate protection. The Defense Department has acknowledged that the previous limit of 3,870 U.S. military trainers and advisors was often exceeded because troops rotating in and out of the country frequently overlapped. Until now, U.S. advisors have worked with the Iraqis at the headquarters level, well back from the front lines. Carter called the addition of the Apache helicopters significant because they can respond so quickly and so dynamically to an evolving tactical situation.
Thanks, Don. From the Washington Post, the headline reads, Russian fighter thumps off at reconnaissance jet. A Russian Su-27 fighter barrel-rolled over a U.S. spy plane operating in international airspace over the Baltic Sea last week, at one point coming within 50 feet of the U.S. aircraft, the Pentagon said Monday. Navy Captain Jeff Davis, a Pentagon spokesman, said the Russian jet went from the left side of the aircraft over the top of the aircraft and ended up on the right side of the aircraft. He said the U.S. aircraft, an RC-135U, was on a routine mission at the time it was intercepted. Davis did not know if the Russian jet was armed. It was at least the seventh close encounter in the past 2 years involving Russian or Chinese fighter jets and RC-135 reconnaissance jets carrying crews from the 55th Wing based at Offutt Air Force Base. Air Force flight crews call the practice thumping. 5 of those thumpings, including the one last week, have involved the 55th Wing's 2 RC-135U aircraft flying over water near the Russian frontier in either the Baltic Sea or the Black Sea. It's designed unequivocally to make the RC-135s go away, former 55th Wing pilot Robert Hopkins III, an author and historian of U.S. reconnaissance flights, said in a February interview with the World Herald. Last week's close call came less than a week after Russian Su-24 jets buzzed the USS Donald Cook, at some points coming within 30 feet of its deck, while the destroyer was on a routine patrol in the Baltic Sea. The Su-24s were not armed. In both instances, the Pentagon has decried the Russian maneuvers as unsafe and aggressive, maintaining that the U.S. craft were operating in international airspace and waters. Russian officials downplayed the incidents. There have been repeated incidents over the last year where Russian military aircraft have come close enough to other air and sea traffic to raise serious safety concerns, and we are very concerned with any such behavior, said Navy Captain Daniel Hernandez, a European command spokesman, in a statement. The RC-135U is a converted Boeing jetliner and one variant of the RC-135 line of reconnaissance planes. The RC-135U is known as the Combat Cent and is designed to detect and collect electronic information broadcast from enemy positions, specifically radar emissions. Russia maintains a modest naval base in the port of Kaliningrad on the Baltic Sea, and in recent months has reportedly moved S-400 surface-to-air missiles there. The S-400 relies on advanced radar system to find its targets and has the ability to intercept aircraft hundreds of miles from its launch site. The missiles in Kaliningrad would be able to strike into the airspace over neighboring NATO countries such as Lithuania, Latvia, and Poland. The recent flybys of U.S. ships and aircraft by Russian jets are nothing new. Aside from repeated incidents in recent years, especially after Russia's intervention in Crimea and Ukraine, the Top Gun-style antics were a hallmark of the Cold War. The frequent close calls prompted both countries to create formal and informal agreements that dictated how Russian and U.S. aircraft and ships would conduct themselves in the skies and on the sea.
Thanks, Deb. Hundreds of refugees are believed to have drowned in the Mediterranean Sea trying to reach Europe 1 year after similar tragedy, Italy's president confirmed Monday. Italian President Sergio Mattarella said during a prize ceremony in Rome on Monday that Europe faced yet another tragedy in the Mediterranean in which, it seems, several hundred people have died. His comments were the first official remarks on an incident that had previously been denied by Italian authorities. Italy's foreign minister also confirmed the tragedy Monday, but said the details were still scarce. The leaders of Somalia issued a joint condolence message to the nation Monday over the unconfirmed report that more migrants, including as many as 300 Somalis, drowned on a trip from Libya to Italy. Reports of the drownings circulated among families, but remained unconfirmed by Coast Guard authorities in Greece, Libya, and Egypt. What is sure is that we are again faced with a tragedy in the Mediterranean, exactly 1 year after the tragedy we had in Libyan waters. Italian Foreign Minister Paolo Gentiloni was quoted as saying Monday by Reuters. In April 2015, more than 700 refugees died in a similar incident when their boat sank on the way to Italy. The incident caused an international outcry and may have helped to convince European politicians, such as German Chancellor Angela Merkel, to adopt a more refugee-friendly policy approach last year. Gentiloni said Monday that more European collaboration was needed. This is another strong reason for Europe to commit itself not to build walls, he said. Previously, the Somali ambassador to Egypt had told BBC Arabic that up to 400 refugees traveling on 4 boats might have died. According to the ambassador, the victims were believed to have come from Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia. A Somali news website carried an interview with Awal Warsami, who said he is a survivor of the incident. There were 500 passengers, mostly Somalis, on the boat, but only 23 people survived, he said. Survivors, including me, had to use broken wood pieces from the capsized boat to float over waters before we were rescued. We had traveled from Egypt, especially Alexandria, on April 7th, and the boat capsized on April 12th. But we were rescued by a Filipino ship off a Greek island 5 days later. Egyptian Foreign Minister spokesman Ahmed Abu Syed said that his office had no information. More sea arrivals coming from North Africa are expected on Europe's southern shores in the coming months. They usually increase during warmer weather.
Thanks, Don. Here are some world shorts from the World Herald. Syrian opposition backs away from peace talks from Geneva. Syria peace talks ran into trouble Monday, with the UN mediator saying the opposition has suspended its formal participation in the indirect discussions with President Bashar Assad's government to protest worrisome new violence, especially near the northern city of Aleppo. Staffan de Mistura, the UN envoy for Syria, said he will press on with the talks despite the suspension by the opposition High Negotiations Committee. The group said it would no longer attend meetings at the UN office in Geneva that has hosted weeks of on and off peace talks, but will remain at its hotel in Geneva. Dr. de Mistura said he will continue technical discussions in hopes of firming up a blueprint for a political transition in Syria. He said he would take stock of progress toward that goal on Friday. From Bangkok, authorities in Thailand said Monday that 442 people died in traffic accidents during the traditional Songkran New Year holiday, a 21% rise over the same period last year, despite stern efforts to curb drunken and unsafe driving. The Road Safety Directing Center announced Monday that there were 3,337 accidents during the week ending Sunday, with motorcycles accounting for more than 81% of the total. And from Jerusalem, a bus exploded in Jerusalem on Monday, wounding at least 21 people in what police said was a terror attack, raising fears of a return to the Palestinian suicide bombings that ravaged Israeli cities a decade ago. There is no doubt that this was a terror attack, Jerusalem Police Commissioner Yoram Haleve said. He said it was too early to know the identity of the attacker or if it was a suicide bombing. It was not clear how many people were on the bus at the time it exploded. Meanwhile, an Israeli military court charged a soldier with manslaughter Monday after he was caught on video fatally shooting a wounded Palestinian attacker, a decision that sets the stage for a rare criminal trial against an active serviceman.
Well, here's some items from around the nation. From Denver, Colorado kids are not smoking more pot since the drug became legal, according to a report giving the most comprehensive data yet on the effects of the state's 2012 recreational marijuana law. The state issued a report Monday detailing changes in everything from pot arrests to tax collections. Surveys at middle schools and high schools indicate that marijuana use by those under 18 didn't rise significantly in the years after the 2012 vote. But the state said that nearly a third of Coloradans 18 to 25 in 2014 said they used pot in the last 30 days, a rise of about 5%. For those over 26, past 30-day marijuana use went from 7.6% in 2012 to 12.4% in 2014. From New York, the Associated Press won the Pulitzer Prize for Public Service Monday for documenting the use of slave labor in Southeast Asia to supply seafood to American tables. The Los Angeles Times was awarded the Breaking News Prize for its coverage of the shooting rampage in San Bernardino, California. The Washington Post received the National Reporting Award for an examination of killings by police in the U.S. The New York Times won for international reporting, while the Times and Thomson Reuters both took the Breaking News Photography Prize. The Boston Globe won the Feature Photography and Commentary Awards. The Tampa Bay Times and the Sarasota Herald Tribune received the Investigative Reporting Prize. The Tampa Bay Times also won in local reporting. ProPublica and the Marshall Project won for explanatory reporting. From Houston, more than a foot of rain had fallen by Monday evening in parts of Houston, submerging several major interstates, closing schools, and knocking out power to thousands. 4 deaths appeared to be weather-related, authorities said. Sylvester Turner, mayor of the nation's 4th largest city, told residents to stay home. Rain gauges in parts of Harris County, which includes most of Houston, showed levels approaching 20 inches from the storms. Officials said thousands of homes in the county outside Houston were flooded, many for the first time. And finally, from Miami, faced with protests, political pressure, and a lawsuit, Carnival Corporation announced Monday that it will allow Cuban-born passengers to book cruises to the island, but will delay the trips if Cuba does not change its policy barring nationals from returning by sea. Carnival CEO Arnold Donald said that the cruise line is continuing negotiations with Cuba aimed at resolving the issue before a scheduled May 1 cruise from Miami to Cuba. It would be the first in more than 50 years.
Thanks, Don. Here's the story. The headline says, "Defining Moment for Court Nominee." From the Associated Press in Washington. In Judge Merrick Garland's courthouse office in Washington, there's a framed photo of Oklahoma City's Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building after the 1995 bombing that ripped away most of its front. There are also a courtroom artist sketch from the prosecution of bomber Timothy McVeigh and a medal honoring Garland for his work on the case. The bombing, 21 years ago today, was a defining moment in the Supreme Court nominee's career. Garland has called it the most important thing I have ever done in my life, President Barack Obama said in an announcement in his nomination. At the time of the bombing, Garland was 42 and Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General, a top lieutenant to Attorney General Janet Reno. He was chosen to go to Oklahoma City, the highest-ranking Justice Department official there, and led the prosecution for a month until a permanent lead prosecutor was named. For 2 years after, through the preparation for McVeigh's trial, he was the team's man at the Justice Department, the person who set the tone and was available for advice, said prosecutors involved in the case. Once it was decided that he would go to Oklahoma, Garland had one evening to pack and say goodbye to his daughters, then 3 and 5. When the FBI plane taking him to Oklahoma City stopped to refuel, he learned that McVeigh was in custody, recalled J. Gilmore Childers, a former federal prosecutor who accompanied Garland. And when they got to Oklahoma, they went directly to McVeigh's arraignment and then to the site of the still smoldering Murrah building. Garland has said he remembers passing through a ring of Humvees, securing the scene, and seeing broken glass and crumbled bricks, and even far from the site. It really looked like a war zone, he said in a 2013 interview for the Oklahoma City National Memorial and Museum. By the time Garland arrived, 65 bodies had been recovered, a death toll that would ultimately grow to 168, including 19 children. The worst part was being told where the kids had been, Garland said. A command center for the response was set up in a nearby telephone company building. There, Garland ran morning, afternoon, and end-of-day briefings with up to 24 people from various agencies involved in the case. He was involved in major investigative decisions, including whether and when to put McVeigh in lineups and whom to have work with a sketch artist. At the time, officials were also pursuing a second suspect, John Doe number 2, who they worried might bomb again, a fear that was ultimately unfounded. Garland was the face of the department out there at the time where people needed to believe that their government was capable of responding to this, said Eitan Goldman, a prosecutor on the case. Garland also spoke for the prosecution in court. At a hearing for McVeigh a week after the bombing, he walked an FBI agent through 4 hours of testimony, and a judge ordered McVeigh held in jail. Outside the hearing, Garland asked reporters and the public for patience. I know that there's a lot more that you all want to know, and a lot of things other people want to know, but I think most people also want to be sure that this investigation goes forward effectively and efficiently, and the only way we're going to be able to do that is to not talk about the different leads that we're pursuing, he said. Garland wanted to lead the trial team prosecuting McVeigh, but he was needed back in Washington. Instead, he helped pick the team and set the tone for the prosecution, said Scott Mendeloff, another prosecutor on the case. It was critical to Garland that the case be handled in such a way to reflect well on our justice system, Mendeloff said. Stephen Jones, McVeigh's lead lawyer, said Garland was always professional and cordial, and though McVeigh was convicted and executed in 2001, Jones had supported Garland's nomination. Patrick Ryan, the former U.S. Attorney for the Western Division of Oklahoma, said the case had a lasting impact on those who worked on it. I know that I could name every single person on every single floor that died, and I bet Merrick could too, he said, adding, I suspect that the emotions of Oklahoma City are still in his heart.
Well, it's 10:22 and time to move on to local and legislative news. Out of Lincoln, Governor Pete Ricketts on Monday issued his second veto this year, sending back a bill that would create an independent commission of citizens to redraw the state's political maps. In a letter to lawmakers, Ricketts called Legislative Bill 580 a major policy shift that's unconstitutional because elected lawmakers, not members of a commission, are required to redistrict every 10 years. He argued that the commission could amount to a hyper-partisan body composed of former political party activists and elected officials. At stake are the voting rights of all Nebraskans, Ricketts said. State Senator John Moranti of Gretna, who introduced the bill, responded by saying that he had not yet decided whether to pursue an override. I want to fully understand the governor's veto message and then discuss his constitutional concerns with some legal experts before I can make my decision, he said. Last week, the bill overcame a final round stalling tactic in the Nebraska legislature and passed on a 29-15 vote. The bill represents a compromise between Moranti and Senator Heath Mello of Omaha, two senators politically active in their respective parties. Moranti is a Republican, Mello is a Democrat. Under their proposal, redistricting would start with the Legislative Research Office, which would draw base redistricting maps and submit those to the Independent Redistricting Citizens Advisory Commission. The state's 3 legislative caucuses, which are based on geographic areas, would pick the commission's 9 members. No more than 5 could be from a single political party. They could not be lobbyists or elected officials or anyone related to or employed by an individual who is an elected constitutional officer. The commission would redraw the state's maps for 6 bodies: the U.S. House, the Legislature, Public Service Commission, University of Nebraska Board of Regents, State Board of Education, and Nebraska Supreme Court. After at least 4 public hearings to gauge public opinion, the maps would be introduced as separate legislative bills and placed on a first-round consideration. While the commission would draw the maps, the legislature would still have final approval. The commission would be a change from the special committee of lawmakers who handled redistricting in 2011 when senators fought over redrawing the state's second congressional district. Lawmakers who served during that time have described the process as divisive and partisan. Ricketts said that although redistricting can be tough, handing the authority to a board appointed by legislative caucuses is outside the spirit and tradition of the nonpartisan legislature. He also said the bill represented an improper delegation of legislative power. LB 580 unnecessarily grows government by creating an unelected and unaccountable board and opens up our redistricting process to political cronyism, he said. I am vetoing this bill today to keep the voices of Nebraskans in the redistricting process. The governor announced the veto just hours after both Mello and Moranti stood next to him at a bill signing ceremony for the Transportation Innovation Act, which creates a transportation infrastructure bank. Gavin Geis, executive director of Common Cause Nebraska, said an independent redistricting commission was upheld in Arizona by the U.S. Supreme Court, making congressional maps drawn by a commission in Nebraska constitutional. He also said that the Nebraska Constitution doesn't bar redistricting authority from being delegated. As long as the legislature retains the ultimate authority in deciding which maps will make the cut, they are meeting their constitutional burden, he said. Excuse me. Moranti said that with redistricting not happening until 2021, his top priority is to establish a process that serves the people's best and conforms to the Constitution. I want to get it right, he said, and I'm not willing to settle for anything less than that.
Thanks, Don. Speaking of that other bill, the headline says Ricketts signs great for Nebraska highway bill from Lincoln. Work could start by 2019 on projects funded by a $450 million highway construction program signed into law Monday by Governor Pete Ricketts. During a bill signing ceremony at the state capitol, the governor praised senators for passing one of his legislative priorities for 2016. Lawmakers voted 48-0 last week to give final approval to what's been called the Transportation Innovation Act. The law earmarks $50 million of the state's cash reserve fund and about $400 million in future state gas tax revenue for expressway construction, county bridge repair, and transportation-related economic development projects. This is something that's going to be great for Nebraska, Ricketts said Monday, flanked by lawmakers, local elected officials, business leaders, road builders, and others who supported Legislative Bill 960. The main component of the law creates a transportation infrastructure bank so the State Department of Roads can complete Nebraska's 600-mile expressway system by 2033. A total of 132 expressway miles remain unfunded until the bill was passed, including stretches of U.S. Highway 275 between Omaha and Norfolk, U.S. Highway 7534 between Omaha and Nebraska City, and U.S. Highway 77 between Wahoo and Fremont. The new law also devotes $40 million for a matching grant program to complete county bridge repair and $20 million for transportation projects that could entice a manufacturer to expand or situate in Nebraska. State Senator Jim Smith of Papillion, who introduced the roads bill on behalf of the governor, called the legislation a capstone to recent efforts by lawmakers to bolster roads funding. In 2011, the legislature directed 1/4 cent of the state's sales tax to go to the highways, roads, and streets. Last year, it passed a 6-cent increase in the gas tax to be phased in over 4 years. It's a big day for commerce in our state, for creating jobs, allowing businesses to expand, giving a reason for businesses to locate in Nebraska, Smith said Monday. The gas tax measure went on the books despite the governor's veto. On Monday, he said he still doesn't support tax increases, including the one that has now become the foundation of his roads initiative. What we wanted to do as far as this bill is, since the gas tax did pass, we were going to dedicate those funds so they were working for the people of Nebraska, Ricketts said. The governor initially wanted to transfer $150 million from the state's rainy day fund to kickstart the infrastructure bank. The legislature agreed to $50 million in cash reserve funds, but lawmakers also voted to increase overall funding by $150 more than the governor proposed. Regulations on how the county bridge and economic development programs will work will be developed this summer, Ricketts said. The roads department also will decide criteria for prioritizing work on expressway projects. West Point Mayor Marlene Johnson, who attended Monday's bill signing, said the new law represents the most significant transportation infrastructure initiative the state has undertaken in decades. In addition to funding, the law authorizes the roads department to use contracting and bidding methods that are expected to trim up to 4 years off major highway construction. Dirk Peterson, Vice President and General Manager of Nucor Steel in Norfolk, said Monday that he was impressed that the governor and senators were able to bring about a passage of the bill so quickly. I've been in other states, and it doesn't always work this way, Peterson said. I'd love to thank our government for working together hand in hand with our industry.
Here's some items from around the metro area, the state, and Iowa. A man found dead Sunday afternoon near 16th and Nicholas Streets behind the Sienna Francis House homeless shelter has been identified. David B. McEwen, 59, was pronounced dead at the scene by medics from the Omaha Fire Department, according to a report by the Omaha Police Department. Officers were called at about 1:40 p.m. to investigate, a police spokesman said, and they found no obvious signs of foul play. Mike Sacklar, the shelter's executive director, said McEwen had been a regular there for 2 years and had spent the previous night at the shelter. Another resident found the man unresponsive, Sacklar said. Dr. Thomas Tape, a professor of internal medicine at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, has been named chairman of the American College of Physicians Board of Regents. The American College of Physicians is the second largest physician group in the United States. It has 143,000 members, including internal medicine physicians, also called internists, subspecialists, and medical students. Tape, 60, will have been at UNMC for 30 years this summer. In Lincoln, LHP, a Lincoln firm that owns and rents housing, has agreed to pay an $8,840 civil penalty for violating federal lead reduction standards during renovation work. Officials with the Regional Environmental Protection Agency announced the settlement Monday. The action stems from a November 2012 work practices inspection done at a rental house at 800 A Street in Lincoln. Inspectors found several violations of the EPA's renovation, repair, and painting rule, which is it's intended to reduce exposure to toxic lead dust and debris that can be generated during work done on houses built before 1978. The violations included failure to post warning signs, to close doors and windows near the renovation, to cover doors and the ground with plastic or other impermeable material, and to contain waste from the renovation. A 77-year-old Kansas motorist was killed Sunday night in a collision near a southeast Nebraska highway intersection. Gary Barton of Haddam was pronounced dead at the scene, which was a half-mile north of the intersection of Nebraska Highway 50 and U.S. Highway 136 near Tecumseh, the Johnson County Sheriff's Office said. Officials found that a northbound 1996 Chevrolet Corsica, driven by Barton, crossed the center line and collided with a southbound 2006 Ford 150 pickup truck, driven by Clark Gartner of Tecumseh. Gartner was wearing a seatbelt and was not injured. Barton was not restrained, the Johnson County Attorney's Office said. From Lincoln, a Lincoln shooting left one man dead and another hospitalized with serious injuries. Lincoln Police Captain Bob Farber told the Lincoln Journal-Star on Monday that there was a public safety risk as authorities continued to look for a suspect in a shooting that afternoon at a Euclid Avenue home. The police also called animal control to report a dog injured by gunfire. Lincoln Police, Nebraska State Patrol officers, and Deputy U.S. Marshals responded to the two-story rental home. Authorities also briefly locked down nearby Prescott Elementary School. Police have not identified the victims. And lastly, from Logan, Iowa, Austin Arndt was sentenced to a maximum of 25 years in prison Monday afternoon. Arndt, 26, will go to prison for his role in the death of Charlotte Anderson, 50, of Logan. Arndt, also of Logan, hit Anderson with his vehicle on July 4, 2015. Earlier this month, Arndt pleaded guilty to vehicular homicide by operating while intoxicated. On Monday, 4th District Court Judge Gregory Steensland handed down his sentence at a packed, emotionally charged Harrison County Courthouse. The sentence also requires Arndt to pay $150,000 in restitution to Anderson's estate. These kind of cases are not easy, Steensland said at the hearing. It is my hope that after sentencing is complete, both families will have some sense of closure.
Thanks, Thanks, Don. The headline reads, Field tests on sex education materials are wrapping up. Omaha school nurses and teachers will wrap up field tests of different health and sex education textbooks and online programs this week and take a vote on which materials they prefer. The Omaha Public Schools Board got a progress report Monday night on the district's controversial update of its human growth and development curriculum. For the past several weeks, 27 schools, 19 elementary schools, 5 middle schools, and 3 high schools have been testing different curriculum options. The board is expected to vote on which curriculum materials to buy in May after getting feedback from teachers and nurses on the pros and cons of the different options. OPS staff narrowed the options after 4 curriculum nights in February and March. At those events, parents and community members got to flip through textbooks and handouts that could make their way into classrooms this fall. Turnout at the curriculum nights was low. At one point, OPS was anticipating 300 people at each site, but only about 20 to 25 people showed up each night. Elementary schools have tried out 2 different publications, Health World and The Great Body Shop. Middle school teachers have tested 3 publications called Teen Health, Health Smart, and Select Lessons from Rights, Respect, Responsibility. High school teachers have tested 3 different materials, Human Biology and Human Sexuality, Health Smart, and certain lessons from Rights, Respect, Responsibility. After months of emotional debate, the OPS board adopted new health and sex education standards in January. It was the first major update since the curriculum was introduced in 1986. Topics that had previously been excluded from human growth and development classes, including abortion, gender identity, and sexual orientation, will now be discussed. Lessons also touch on nutrition, drug and alcohol abuse, pregnancy prevention, including abstinence and birth control, sexually transmitted diseases, and dating violence. Classes start in 4th grade and focus mainly on puberty and hygiene and proceed through middle and high school. By high school, the course is a semester long. Parents can opt their students out of all or part of the lessons at any grade level. During public comment, John Dockery, a sex education opponent, said he was dismayed to see several publications tested that he said have been supported by Planned Parenthood, especially advocates for youth's rights, respect, responsibility. When sexual freedom is taught, sexual health suffers, he said. You can't have it both ways. Board member Yolanda Williams said she wished the board had been told which options were being tried out in which schools before the field test started. Parents at schools testing the new materials did receive permission slips, staff said. Board President Lou Ann Godding said the district would have to continue to inform parents of coming changes and help them navigate whichever curriculum is adopted.
Thanks, Deb. It's 10:40, and because of the number of death notices and funeral arrangements in both papers. That's the Journal-Star and the World Herald. We're going to begin with those notices now, and I'm going to begin with those found in the Lincoln Journal-Star. And the first notice is for Anderson, Kyle J. Anderson, age 57, of Lincoln. Memorials may be given to the family. Colonial Chapel Funeral Home is handling the arrangements. Bargar, Gary D. Bargar, age 79, of Lincoln. Services are pending with Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home. Bernard, Barbara J. Bernard, of Omaha, age 67. In lieu of flowers, memorials to the Newman Center at UNL. The arrangements are being handled by Hefe Hoffman Doric Color. Brockmuller, Everett A. Brockmuller, age 90, of Waverly. Everett was a veteran of the U.S. Army. And memorials are to Faith Lutheran Church in Lincoln, Wyuka Funeral Home are handling the arrangements, and there will be a military ceremony at the Wyuka Cemetery. Bruce, Anne E. Bruce, age 74, of Lincoln. Actually, she was born in Sioux City, Iowa. In lieu of flowers, please make donations in Anne's honor to the Friendship Home of Lincoln. Roper and Sons can provide you with the details. Converse, Kathleen M. Converse, age 67, of Lincoln. Memorials to Hearts United for Animals. That's in Auburn, Nebraska. And the funeral home is, I believe it's Roper and Sons. Roper and Sons can provide you with any details. Dantzler, Carl Dantzler, age 93. Let's see, it says Buttress, Mazer, and Love Funeral Home. No other information is provided. Does Shot, Irvin Lyle Does Shot, that's D-O-E-S, as in Sam, C-H-O-T, age 86, of Lincoln. Lincoln Funeral Home can provide you with details. Ebbers-Patcher, Dean Ebbers-Patcher, 86, of Milford. Ebbers-Patcher is, I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly. It's spelled E-B-E-R-S-P-A-C-H-E-R. That's Dean. And Dean was 86, like I said, of Milford. Memorials may be directed in care of the family for future designation. Moore Funeral Home in Milford is entrusted with the care and the arrangements. Eichmeyer, Dorothy Eichmeyer, age 90, of Beatrice, Nebraska. Memorials to the Children's Apraxia of Speech Association. That's probably Apraxia of Speech Association. Team Avery. Let's see, the funeral home is Wyuka Funeral Home in Beatrice. Hackle, Sally Lynn Hackle, H-A-K-E-L, could be Hakel, age 57, of Lincoln. Trump Funeral Services are handling the arrangements. Hoosier, Eldon C. Hoosier of Wilbur, age 90. More information is sure to follow. James, Justin D. James, age 41. Let's see. No funeral home or any other information has been provided. More to follow, I'm sure. Johnson, Ronald Lee Johnson, 83, of Unadilla. Mr. Johnson served in the U.S. Army. Memorials to Hopewell Cemetery Association. Arrangements are being handled by Fusselman Allen Harvey Funeral Home in Syracuse. Kenning. Eleanor Kenning, formerly of Steel City, age 93. More information is sure to follow. Messersmith. Rex Glenn Messersmith, age 84, of Lincoln. Donations may be sent in Rex's name to either the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research or the American Diabetes Association. Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home handling the arrangements. Oliver, Doris Oliver, age 92, of Falls City. More information to follow. Roberts, Richard D. Roberts of Harrison, Arkansas, formerly of Lincoln, age 87. More information is sure to follow. Ruge, or Ruge, R-U-G-E, Judith Ann Ruge, age 70. More information is sure to follow. Sabatka, Celestine M. Sabatka, age 93, of Wahoo. Memorials to St. Wenceslas Catholic Church or Foundation Fighting Blindness. That's Foundation Fighting Blindness. Marcy Svoboda Funeral Home. I believe that's in Wahoo, handling the arrangements. Well, it's Svoboda Funeral Home in Wahoo, handling the arrangements. Schaefer, Larry Wayne Schaefer, age 74. Memorials may be made in Larry's honor to the Dubois Community Park Fund. Wary Mortuary in Pawnee City is handling the arrangements. Seaman, Velva E. Seaman of Hebron, age 88. More information to follow. Timmons, James Austin Timmons, age 87, died at his home in Omaha. In lieu of flowers, memorials are suggested to Holy Cross Catholic Church or VNA Hospice. And no funeral home has been provided. Voss, Shannon R. Voss, age 28, nickname was Shay, or maybe that was maiden name. It doesn't say for sure. But Ms. Voss was 28, of Lincoln. Memorials in care of the family. Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home handling the details. They can provide you with any other information you need. Waller, Jimmy Dwayne Waller, age 67, of Hickman, a service veteran, served his country in the 101st Airborne during the Vietnam War. It says no services, alternative funeral and cremation services. Worley, W-E-H-R-L-I, Geneva M. Worley, age 93, of Lincoln, was born in Villisca, Iowa. Memorials to the family for a future designation. Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home can provide you with details. White, Darrell E. White, age 66, formerly of Lincoln, passed away in Phoenix, Arizona. Was an Army vet during the Vietnam War. It says private family memorial service will be held at a later date. Memorials may be sent to Patriot Productions. Wilcox, Dean Rex Wilcox, age 82, of York. Metz Mortuary in York can provide you with the details. The last notice in today's Journal Star is for Wright. Lois Elaine Wright, age 92, of North Platte. Memorials to Premier Estates in North Platte. Odeon Colonial Chapel in North Platte is in charge of arrangements. And those, Deb, are today's funeral arrangements and notices in the Lincoln Journal-Star.
Thanks, Don. We'll turn now to the obituaries and funeral arrangements in the Omaha World Herald. The first one is Barker, Joseph Barker III, age 79. Mr. Barker was a veteran. Services will be Thursday at 11 o'clock at All Saints Episcopal Church. Memorials are asked to All Saints Episcopal Church or Big Brothers Big Sisters of the Midlands. Heafy Hoffman Dora Cutler is in charge of arrangements. Blinkow, Mark E. Blinkow, age 80, formerly of Oxford, Nebraska. The family is planning a gathering in the celebration of Mark's life to be held in Oxford at a later date. Bremen Mortuary is in charge of arrangements. Rose D. Bozak, age 92. Services will be Wednesday at 9:30 from the Heafy Hoffman Dora Cutler Mortuary to St. Francis Cabrini Catholic Church for Mass at 10 a.m. Memorials are asked to St. Francis Cabrini Catholic Church. Budka, Judy Ann Lantafeld Budka, age 65. The funeral service will be 11 o'clock Thursday at the Corisco Larkin Staskowitz Chapel on F Street. Burroughs, Mitzi Burroughs, age 65. The celebration of life memorial will be Wednesday, April 20th from 3 to 6 p.m. at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Chapel, 2210 Harlan Drive in Bellevue. Memorials, please sent to the Bellevue Memorial Funeral Chapel to be dispersed by the family, and the Bellevue Memorial Chapel, Heafy Hoffman is in charge of arrangements. Cameron, Judy Joan Pasco Cameron, age 78. The funeral service will be at 10 a.m. at the West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home on Wednesday. Memorials are asked to the Josie Harper Hospice House in Omaha. West Lawn Hillcrest is in charge of arrangements. Castro Rodriguez, Dolores A. Castro Rodriguez, age 56. The funeral will be at 1 o'clock Friday at Bethany Funeral Home, and Bethany is in charge of arrangements. 82nd and Harrison. Seahall, Stanley E. Seahall, C-I-H-A-L, aged 84. His body was donated to the State Anatomical Board, and there will be no services. Colanino, Gay E. Colanino, aged 80. A complete notice will follow from Crosby, Burkett, Swanson, Golden. Day, Howard Day, age 71, member of the Tangier Shrine. The funeral service will be 11 o'clock Wednesday the 20th at the Bellevue Memorial Chapel. Memorials are asked to the Tangier Children's Transportation Fund. Derby, Susan L. Derby, age 59, of Louisville, Nebraska. The funeral service will be at 10:30 Wednesday at Trinity Lutheran Church in Murdoch. The family prefers memorials to the Trinity Lutheran Church. Roeder Mortuary, the Gretna Chapel, is in charge of arrangements. Fuller, Elijah James Fuller, Jim Fuller, age 93, was a veteran of the Army. Served in Korea and other places. The memorial service will be at 10 o'clock Friday, April 22nd at the chapel at St. Peter's Episcopal Church. I don't know what town that is. And interment followed with military honors at the Sheridan Municipal Cemetery. Kane Funeral Home in Sheridan, Wyoming is in charge of arrangements. Grogan, Jenny M. Grogan, age 90. There will be a private family service. Crosby, Burkett, Swanson, Golden is in charge of arrangements. Gooden, Gloria J. Gooden, age 72. The memorial service will be 6 o'clock Wednesday at the Thomas Funeral Home. Griffith, Dale E. Griffith, age 83, of Omaha. Mr. Griffith was a veteran of the Korean War Army. Funeral service will be 11 o'clock Wednesday, April 20th at Bremen Mortuary, the 72nd Street Chapel. Memorials may be made to the Korean War Veterans Association, Nebraska. It says Chapter 1 at KWVA, in care of Sandra Lim. Bremen Mortuary is in charge of arrangements. Jardee, Irene Leona Jardee, aged 89. The services will be Wednesday at 10 a.m. at Mary R. Queen Catholic Church. Memorials are asked to St. Jude Children's Hospital. John A. Gentleman is in charge of arrangements. Johnson, Betty Carolyn Serber Johnson, aged 80. The memorial service will be 11 a.m. Wednesday, the 20th, at the Lutheran Church of the Master, North 181st Street in Elkhorn. Johnson, Cornelius Johnson, age 67. The funeral service will begin 11 o'clock Thursday at King Solomon Baptist Church on Evans Street. Good Shepherd Funeral Home is in charge of arrangements. Kelly, Patrick Kelly, age 74. Mr. Kelly was a veteran. The Massive Christian Burial will be Wednesday at 10:30 at Mary Immaculate Catholic Church on Military Avenue. In lieu of flowers, memorials may be made to the cancer research at UNMC. Please send donations to the NU Foundation. John A. Gentleman is in charge of arrangements. Kipperman, Lawrence R. Kipperman, aged 80. A memorial service will be held Thursday, the 21st at Temple Israel. Memorials to the Milton Marcus Instrumental Music Endowment Fund at Bethel Synagogue or the charity of your choice. The Jewish Funeral Home is in charge of arrangements. Kohlhoff, Sharon K. Kohlhoff, age 73. The service will be at 10:30 a.m. Thursday, April 21st at Volsky Funeral Home in Seward. Memorials in care of the Kohlhoff family or the donor's choice, Volsky Funeral Home in Seward. Mackenzie, Ina Faye Mackenzie. She was a member of the Eastern Star. She was 97 of Plattsmouth and formerly of Weeping Water. The funeral service will be 10:30 Wednesday the 20th at the United Methodist Church in Weeping Water. Memorials to the church or the donor's choice, Hammond's Family Funeral Services. Miklas, Mary A. Kersigo Miklas, aged 81. The funeral will be Wednesday at 10 o'clock at the Bethany Funeral Home Chapel. Memorials will be directed by the family. The Bethany Funeral Home is at 82nd and Harrison. Mitchell, Josephine Joe Mitchell, age 98. The funeral service will be Thursday at 10 o'clock at Corisco Larkin Staskowitz. In lieu of flowers, please send donations to the North Platte or Omaha Humane Society or the Open Door Mission in Omaha, Corisco Larkin Staskowitz. Murray, Maureen M. Murray, age 64 of Omaha. There will be a memorial mass Friday the 22nd at 11 o'clock at St. Patrick's Catholic Church in Elkhorn. In lieu of flowers, memorials may be made to the family. Brayman Mortuary, the 72nd Street Chapel, is in charge of arrangements. Neubauer, Mary Jo Weirs Neubauer, age 70. The Massive Christian Burial will be Thursday at 10:30 at St. Thomas More Catholic Church. Memorials to the Josie Harper Hospice House or Burger Mercy Cancer Center. Fifi Hoffman Dwarf Cutler is in charge of arrangements. Oldham, Michelle Mickey Oldham, age 73. The services will be Thursday at 10 o'clock at St. Philip Neri Catholic Church. Memorials to Encore. John A. Gentleman Mortuaries is in charge of arrangements. Randall, Doris M. Randall, age 92 of Blair. The service will be 10 o'clock Thursday, April 21st at the Roeder Mortuary in Omaha, the 108th Street Chapel. Schaefer, Larry Wayne Schaefer, age 74. Services will be 3 p.m. Saturday, April 23rd at the First Presbyterian Church in Pawnee City. Memorials may be made in Larry's honor to the Dubois Community Park Fund. Wary Mortuary in Pawnee City, Nebraska is in charge of arrangements. Steimer, Glenn A. Steimer, aged 80. He was a veteran of the Marine Corps and also retired from the Omaha Police Department. Massive Christian Burial will be Thursday at 10 o'clock at St. Robert Bellarmine Catholic Church with military honors by the Benson VFW Post 2503 and the Marine Corps Honor Guard. Memorials to the Nebraska Humane Society or the Omaha Police Foundation. Fifi Hoffman Dwarf Cutler is in charge of arrangements. And finally, Timmons, James Austin Timmons, aged 87. Mr. Timmons was a veteran. In lieu of flowers, memorials are asked to Holy Cross Catholic Church or the VNA Hospice. The Massive Christian Burial will be Thursday at 10:30 a.m. at Holy Cross Catholic Church. Will be buried with military honors by the American Legion Post No. 1. Fifi Hoffman Dwarf Cutler is in charge of arrangements.
Thank you, Deb. And before we go to our break, moving to our break here, here's a small item. A Fort Calhoun 7th grader died Monday after collapsing at track practice, the superintendent of Fort Calhoun Community School said. At about 4 p.m., the student, Gabe Namath, was taken by ambulance from Fort Calhoun Junior-Senior High School to Emmanuel Medical Center in Omaha. He died on arrival, Superintendent Don Johnson said. After he collapsed, coaches at the practice immediately began life-saving measures, and paramedics continued to try to revive Namath as at the school and on the way to the hospital, Johnson said. The Fort Calhoun Community School family mourns the loss of this young life, and our thoughts and prayers go out to the student's family, he said in a written statement Monday night. School activities planned for the remainder of Monday, including a high school concert, were canceled. Grief counselors will be available for students and staff today, Johnson said. He declined to make public further information Monday night out of respect for the boy's family, he said. We would ask everyone to join us in supporting this family in their time of need.
Thanks, Don. We want to remind you that listeners' memorials to the Radio Talking Book Network are tax deductible and will go a long way in keeping Radio Talking Book on the air. Please keep Radio Talking Book in mind when memorials are listed as Donor's Choice or your favorite charity. Donations should be sent to Radio Talking Book Network, 7101 Newport Avenue, Suite 205, Omaha, Nebraska, 68152. Thank you for being a Radio Talking Book Network listener and supporter.
And thank you very much for that reading. And thank you, Don Van, for reading the first hour. First thing we'd like to do is to clean the home.
Yeah, that we're supposed to read that all the time.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's the only ad we have.
Yeah.
So then it goes to,
We'll start with the public pulse, and then we'll do the editorials. Do you have editorials, Don?
Yeah, I mean, I've got from the World Heralds somewhere.
On the back of that column.
Yeah, here it is. That's,
Yeah.
I'll do these two.
This one too.
No, I don't think so. Well, I think I can.
Well, I could.
This is a good one, though. I think.
Yeah, I think we want to do that one.
And then for the entertainment, we could do the Zoom,
Yeah.
Ask Amy. Actually, the one about the guy photographing all the animals is kind of good. I mean, even though that, see, like, why would we tell people who can't see very well about photographs? But really, I think people want to know what's going on. That's why we don't usually do movie reviews. Although there are movies. They do movies for people. You have people tell
People
what's
here
going on.
narrate the movies. They
Yeah.
describe what's happening. He crosses the room. He sits on the couch. She cries. You know, things like
There's
that.
somebody sneaking up on a guy or something.
My migraine aura is starting, and so it's a little hard for me to read.
You're getting a migraine? Oh,
Uh-huh.
that's terrible.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know you get them.
Oh, I do. All the time.
They can't figure out what does that. What causes that?
Stress.
You don't have stress. I think you need more alcohol.
More alcohol?
More alcohol, yeah.
That's my answer.
There you go.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
I can take over.
No, well, we'll see how it goes.
I can sit in too.
You're tuned to the Radio Talking Book Network in Nebraska, or your print information network, and we've been proudly serving the blind and visually impaired listeners in Nebraska for over 41 years. The Radio Talking Book Network is brought to you with the cooperation of KIOS-FM in Omaha and statewide through the facilities of NET Radio and Television. Now, let's return to our readers for the second hour of reading from this morning's Omaha World Herald. Let's welcome back once again Don Van and Ted Beatty.
Thank you, Paul. We'll begin this hour with the opinions and editorials, and we'll begin with the public letters to the public pulse in the Omaha World Herald. This first letter is from Scott Sumter of Omaha. He says, I learned at a very young age to play nicely with others. It appears those in control of Omaha Performing Arts were never taught that lesson. He's referring to parking stalls at Tipping Point in HDR giving up on site from the April 17th World Herald. So here it is. OPA, the city owes you nothing. You must work for what you want and be a community player. If you do, chances are you'll get a lot further in the future. From Georgia Lippert of Papillion. Governor Pete Ricketts' veto of Legislative Bill 947, which would allow young immigrants brought to this country illegally as children to get professional and commercial licenses, is yet another example of his myopic worldview and lack of understanding of the common good and common sense. He refers to veto of work licenses for DACA youth isn't a lock on April 16th, World Herald. As written and amended, LB 947 has enough safeguards to satisfy most skeptics while providing for the needs of those affected and the state of Nebraska, its citizens, and the vitality of our workforce and economy. Most legislators understand this. The rationale that this bill is an affront to immigrants who follow the legal process to enter the country does not hold water. When DACA youths find themselves in circumstances not of their own making, they deserve a hand up, not a push down. Given an opportunity, most will seek citizenship while they work. To restrict one group's licensure opportunity is both mean-spirited and lacks an understanding of the value of inclusiveness of all cultures and races. Remember, we are in this world together. Let's be caring. Let's be sharing an opportunity to all people. Again, that's from George Lippert of Papillion. From Dennis Schaefer of Omaha. Omaha Mayor Gene Stothert apparently believes that the entire current Omaha garbage contract with Waste Management needs to be renegotiated in order to realize significant cost savings. He refers to city calls for study on yard waste disposal, April 2nd, World Herald. I submit that incremental savings could be mandated under the existing contract and could easily achieve the same goal. On our street, there was a startling procedural change when Waste Management took over. Previously, Deffenbaugh trucks made a single pass down our narrow residential street, picking up recyclables or garbage from both sides of the street. Now, Waste Management trucks make one pass down our street from north to south and pick up items only on the west side of the street, even though at each stop they're only a few steps away from similar items on the east side of the street. Within about an hour of that first pass, those same Waste Management trucks make another pass from south to north and pick up the items on the east side of the street. That's 2 passes for recyclables and 2 passes for garbage, when 1 pass for each was previously sufficient. This horrendous waste of man-hours and diesel fuel should be an obvious opportunity to increase efficiency within the company operations at Waste Management and thus reduce costs to the city. Stothert needs to stop looking for a grand slam and realize that a string of singles could easily be the winning ticket within the current contract. Again, Dennis Schaefer of Omaha. From Brent Orm of Norton, Kansas. In the criticism of President Barack Obama's recent speech in Argentina, in the April 18th Public Pulse writer Aldona Tanner, Communism's Human Toll, fails to understand the scope and context of the region's history. Tanner also fails in her understanding of economic and political systems. First, there has never been a true Marxist communist nation. The Soviet Union, China, Cambodia, and North Korea are or were socialist nations with dictatorial governments. While the crimes of these nations against their own people are truly horrific, such things are not limited to socialist dictatorships. The military junta that ruled capitalist Argentina in the 1970s and early 1980s is a great example. A person who criticized that government or its leaders during that time would have been labeled a communist, arrested, tortured, and likely would have disappeared. All of the person's friends, family, and acquaintances would have often met the same fate. If the person had a newborn child or toddler, the child would likely have been adopted by families of police or military officers, many times the same people responsible for the person's death. While President Obama certainly has his flaws, perhaps we can consider the context of the speech when placed with Argentina's not too distant history and see that it possibly had other purposes. Again, that was from Brent Orm of Norton, Kansas. And finally, Paul Rust from Omaha writes, I need to inform April 16th Public Pulse writer Herb Vermas, who now lives in Salem, Illinois, that Nebraskans do not want or need anyone from outside our state telling whom we should support for president. He refers to the article, Trump Will Doom GOP Shot at Presidency. It appears that Vermas is afraid of Trump being elected and turning this country around after nearly 8 terrible years of this failed administration. We need someone who will take charge and protect the citizens of this country from those coming in illegally. Vermas should worry about the election in Illinois, not Nebraska. Paul Rust of Omaha.
Thanks, Deb. Well, let's find out what the editorial writers for the World Herald have to say today. And this is regarding the DACA youth. It's a veto override helps state. Dreamers were in no position to make decisions about crossing the U.S. border illegally years ago. That's because they were children at the time. At age 2 or 5 or even 10 or 12, you go where your parents take you. For about 3,000 of these young children, that place was Nebraska. They have been living in Nebraska towns and cities ever since, attending Nebraska schools for one birthday after another. Now they're growing up, graduating from high school, pursuing higher education, and looking for careers right here in the place they've grown up and call home. They can legally work in the United States under the federal policy known as Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. But without a change in state law, they're locked out of many jobs and professions that require a state license or certification, 170 of them to be exact. These range from dentists to teachers, audiologists to well drillers, cosmetologists to social workers, engineers to veterinarians. Many Nebraskans are concerned about having a robust labor pool for the state's employers, who are trying to grow their businesses at a time of low unemployment. Many Nebraskans also worry about a brain drain and are looking for ways to keep young people in the state. And that's just what these young adults want to do, live and work in the state they consider home. Under Legislative Bill 947, those with DACA status could seek state certification for these jobs. And 33 state lawmakers thought that was a worthy plan, voting for the bill on final passage last week. Now, Governor Pete Ricketts has vetoed the measure, setting up a veto override attempt Wednesday by State Senator Heath Mello of Omaha, who introduced the legislation. LB 947 would build on the action of the legislature last year to grant these young immigrants the right to obtain a Nebraska driver's license. Ricketts argues that DACA status might not withstand court scrutiny and that a future president could throw out the policy. That's no reason for lawmakers to withdraw their support for LB 947, however. Under the bill, the professional licenses would expire if the license holders lost their federal work authorization. In the meantime, why educate these ambitious young people only to send them out of Nebraska? And there's one small little opinion here from the World Herald's editorial writers. It's Nebraska and Iowa voter registration laws make voting easier than many states, such as New York, where 2 children of Republican presidential candidate and New Yorker Donald Trump won't be able to vote for their father today. Under New York's onerous law, Eric and Ivanka Trump were required to change their registrations from independent to Republican by October 9, 2015, a full 6 months before the primary. No wonder New York ranked 3rd from the bottom among states in voter turnout in 2014. Voting booth access is critical in our democracy, and it shouldn't be that difficult. Deb?
Thanks, Don. Here's an editorial in the World Herald by Matthew Blomstead, who is the Commissioner of Education of Nebraska. And also, he's a research analyst of the legislature's Education Committee from 2006 to 2008. He writes, for a decade, the learning community and its common levy, created to address the complex relationships among 11 Omaha metro school districts, have loomed over Nebraska, creating a haze almost as thick as the smoke from the recent controlled grassland burns in Kansas. Ironically, legislative action ending the contentious learning community common levy occurred 10 years to the day from when it first was enacted on April 13, 2006. Back in 2006, Senator Ron Rakes of Lincoln led the controversial legislative approach to fight a battle that had sparked a year earlier. The Omaha Public Schools One City, One School District plan fanned smoldering embers that had been glowing under the surface, threatening to ignite for decades. It's fair to say Senator Rake's legislation was an effort to resolve those long-standing issues and that he expected the learning community to evolve. It certainly has been amended several times in recent years. This past week, Senator Kate Sullivan of Cedar Rapids successfully passed legislation to set aside the controversial common levy. Now there is growing recognition of the importance of the sense of community around education in the Omaha metropolitan area. The winds of change have turned to focus on collaboration and community responsibilities for student learning and achievement. As a former legislative staffer in Senator Rake's office, I lived through some of the history and the development of the learning community. In 2012, long before I had any idea I would be Commissioner of Education, I wrote my doctoral dissertation somewhat begrudgingly on the common levy. Through that study of written records, I relived how the common levy developed and ultimately survived a court challenge. I also dared to write advice to a number of the future policymakers in the findings of my dissertation. Ironically, my advice to a future education commissioner was, perhaps the commissioner can play the role of the first responder and a forest ranger, constantly looking for that first sign of smoke. Shortly after completing my doctorate, I found myself applying for the job. When I literally saw smoke over southeastern Nebraska last week, and as Senator Sullivan and the legislature attempted to put out the common levy fire that burned for more than a decade, I was reminded of my own advice. I'm hopeful that, like the controlled Kansas grassland burn, our Nebraska educational ecosystem is renewed. As commissioner, my role is to watch and help ensure that no other fires flare up in the learning community or elsewhere in the state. While some areas still may smolder and need attention, school districts must continue to work together to address the issues that ignited this controversy. We must address statewide achievement gaps among student groups by race, ethnicity, and poverty, as well as students with special needs. We must address the critical need to advance our entire education system by identifying and focusing our collective resources on the challenges of our schools and students. We must recognize that the responsibilities of the learning community are not different from those of the entire state. With the future in mind, the State Board of Education and I purposefully built a diagnostic accountability and policy tool, Accountability for a Quality Education System Today and Tomorrow, AQUEST. I guess you would say it. Through AQUEST, 30 schools in the learning community were identified as needs improvement. Of those 30 schools, 28 are in OPS. The board and I are responsible for developing policy for an education system that honestly and fairly addresses the state's education challenges. The state board is working to set a strategic vision, which is a new foundation with a focus on student achievement and support systems for student success. It is time that we pull together and focus collectively on this important work, not only in the learning community, but also statewide. With this effort, I am confident new growth will sprout. When that occurs, then the fire was not in vain.
Thanks, Deb. Well, it's 18 minutes after the hour, and that means we're going to move on to today's living and entertainment sections of the paper. And that, of course, means Amy Dickinson. So let's hear what kind of advice we're going to get from Amy today. Dear Amy, I thought I had the perfect marriage until I met Brian about 3 years ago. I instantly felt a connection and attraction to him. I try my hardest not to feel this way. I don't see him very often. We work together, but I can't shake these feelings. We have spoken about the mutual attraction between us and have kissed once. He doesn't do anything to encourage a relationship between us, and neither do I. He is in the process of getting divorced, and I know he doesn't want to come between my husband and me. I just can't stop thinking about him, even if I don't see him for months at a time. I'm becoming numb and depressed at home, and I don't know how to change these feelings. I can't talk to anyone about this. I feel ashamed, guilty, and embarrassed. I've been married for 26 years and have never looked or thought about another man before. How can I stop these feelings? Signed, Sad. Well, dear Sad, you say that you and Brian have not done anything to encourage a relationship, but sharing intimacies, complaining about your marriage, and hello, kissing are all choices that foster an intimate relationship between two people while also interfering with your respective marriages. Your reaction now, feeling depressed, numb, and ashamed about your work relationship, will also interfere with your marriage. You are having an emotional affair, and it doesn't matter how often you actually see this other person because your emotions are running the show. If you want to save your marriage, then you will have to re-engage with your husband and be very intentional about trying to repair and recommit to him. You cannot do that and have any contact with this other person because the contact, in person or textual, triggers the cycle. The best way to deal with this is to invite your husband to strategize about how to improve your marriage. Counseling can help. Dear Amy, I recently planned a 3-day driving trip for 4 other couples to a remote location in another country. All of the arrangements were made based on my experience traveling there many times for almost 20 years, but I made it clear that I was not the guide and was doing this as a courtesy. I wired the hotel deposit, emailed information and paperwork to everyone, and even had a get-together in my home the week before the trip so everyone could meet. 2 of the couples were old friends, but I knew the wife of another, Brenda, very slightly. Prior to the trip, Brenda sent me numerous emails challenging and questioning every part of the plan. At the destination, she complained about the parking, didn't like the food or the amenities, and took advantage of the kindness of a friend of ours who lives there. These negative comments were voiced to me on a daily basis, and it affected my enjoyment of the trip. On the other hand, when we got home, she sent me a lovely thank you. There seems to be a big disconnect between her actions and her perception of the effect of her behavior. So, what do I do when or if she calls and wants to get together? Do I lie and say that I'm busy, or do I just tell her that I don't see our friendship moving forward? Signed, wanting to be an ex. Well, dear ex, because this person was polite enough to thank you for allowing her to ruin your vacation, you seem to think she will want to engage in an ongoing friendship with you. I doubt this, but if she makes an overture, you can very easily say, "No, thank you. I'm still trying to get over our vacation." And lastly, dear Amy, I'm responding to desperate parent who wanted to control her daughter's major in college. We supported our daughter through college, both emotionally and financially. We never criticized her choices. They belonged to her and to her only. 1 year out of college, with a year of full-time work under her belt, she was offered 2 jobs the first week after graduation. She is off to nursing school at an Ivy League college. She did this all entirely by herself. She owns this. Are we proud? You bet. To the worried mother, I say, let her go. Signed, Proud Mom. Dear Mom, if the student is doing well, I agree that parents should suggest, but not dictate, academic choices. There you go, Deb.
Thanks, Don. Too late for me.
Me
Here's
too.
a story on zoo safety, and begins on the front page of the Midlands section. To handle animal emergencies, the key is practice, practice. The harsh realities of training a dangerous animal are well known to the staff of the Henry Dorley Zoo and Aquarium. On Friday, a zookeeper at the Palm Beach Zoo in Florida died after being mauled by a tiger in an off-exhibit space. The zoo barricaded its guests inside a gift shop, closed its doors, and later evacuated the visitors. It had a plan in place for an emergency. Although incidents like these are rare, they do happen. Zoos such as Omaha's dedicate a lot of time to preparing for them. The Association of Zoos and Aquariums requires zoos to hold 4 types of emergency drills once per year: weather environmental, injury to zoo staff or visitors, animal escape, and fire. Omaha Zoo holds 4 times as many drills as are required. During an animal escape drill, a zoo staffer will use a walkie-talkie to alert the rest of the zoo staff that an animal has escaped. The staffer is often out of breath and sounds panicky. It's almost like a little bit of a contest. How real can you sound? Said Dan Hauser, the zoo's curator of large mammals. Then keepers and staff spring into action. Some head to the animal's last known whereabouts to control the situation, while others head for shelter. Very few people know about the drill. When it's done right, it's convincing. This has to sound real, Hauser said. Throughout the zoo, we have people located to observe and take notes and not interfere. Let everybody react how they've been trained to react. A team of zoo staffers, which includes Hauser, meets regularly to plan these drills. Their goal is to have everybody, especially vets with immobilizing drugs, respond to the scene within 5 minutes. We've never taken 5 minutes, he said. The last one took about 3. Every zoo employee trains for these drills, which are held before the zoo opens to the public in the morning. They're a big point of emphasis, but safety really starts with the day-to-day precautions. Outside each dangerous animal enclosure is a large tag on the door, warning that such an animal is inside. Once inside the exhibit, keepers survey the room looking for the animal, even if it's not supposed to be inside. Zookeepers follow a 2-person rule when they work with any animal that could be dangerous, even sea lions, which Hauser said are very, very safe. The keepers use the same motions, the same safeguards. That way, it takes 2 people to make a mistake, which essentially is almost impossible, Hauser said. Somebody would have to absolutely not do what they are supposed to do for a mistake to occur. Still, no matter how much preparation takes place, things happen. In February 2009, the zoo's director of animal health, Dr. Doug Armstrong, was bitten by a Malaysian tiger who had been sedated for a medical examination. Armstrong brushed the tiger's whiskers, and the tiger had a natural muscle twitch that caused it to bite down on Armstrong's arm 2 or 3 times, he recalled at the time. Zookeepers finished handling the animal, and Armstrong was taken to the hospital with injuries to his forearm. His muscles healed, and there was no permanent nerve damage. Everything was handled exactly how it should have been, Hauser said. I think the only thing that happened would be within our hospital staff, that our veterinary staff is now aware that these types of twitches can occur, so they're cautious about how they situate themselves. The reality, he said, is that with wild animals, sometimes bad things just happen. Officials from zoos talk with one another about ways to improve what they do.
Well, here we go. This is an interesting one, I think. Pregnancy experts, including those at the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, recommend that most pregnant women get 30 minutes of exercise a day. If that feels a little onerous, consider new findings from Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, which suggest that a love of physical activity may start in the womb. So maybe women who won't exercise for their own sake will do it for the baby. The research involved mice, not women. A team led by Robert A. Waterland, an assistant professor of pediatrics, nutrition, and molecular human genetics, selected female mice that enjoyed running, according to a press release. Half of them were put in cages with running wheels during pregnancy. The other half had no wheels. The mice with running wheels voluntarily ran an average of more than 6 miles a night, decreasing to about 2 miles late in pregnancy. The offspring of those mothers turned out to be about 50% more physically active than those born to mothers who hadn't had the exercise wheel option. And that difference persisted into mouse adulthood. How does this relate to our species? Observational studies of active pregnant women and their babies have reported results consistent with ours, Waterland said. But in the human studies, it wasn't always clear whether active mothers who have active children simply raise their kids to exercise a lot, or whether there might have been a genetic predisposition to physical activity that was passed from mother to baby. The Baylor scientists were able to correct for those variables in the mice experiment. Our study in a mouse model is important because we can take all those effects out of the equation, Waterman said. I think our results offer a very positive message. If expectant mothers know that exercise is not only good for them, but also may offer lifelong benefits for their babies, I think they will be more motivated to get moving. Now, I don't know what's the most fascinating part of this was, to me, I didn't know a mouse could run 6 miles.
6 miles a night. That's pretty far.
You know, they don't go very far. Their steps are pretty small.
Yes, but fast.
But they're fast.
That's true.
Whoa.
Here's an interesting story from the living section of the Omaha World Herald. First of all, there's a little bit about an exhibition. It's an art exhibit featuring metal sculpture art. It will be at the Bancroft Street Market on 10th and Bancroft. There will be an artist reception and opening from 7 to 10 on Friday, and the exhibition will open at 10, from 10 to 5 on Saturday and noon to 5 on Sunday. And you can find information at womenwhoweld.net. The headline says, "Women Who Weld Bring About Metamorphosis in Gender Roles." Melinda Ames, maybe Eames, slides on her blue shielding mask decorated with flames. Sparks fly and she squints through the narrow window in the protective gear to weld together an art piece for a show at Bancroft Street Market. In a room with several other women who weld, she melts down metal and sticks pieces together to craft a very permanent piece of art. Ames makes what she calls contraptions. They're large metal pieces that sometimes move, made from junk found all over. Old shears, springs, and wheels. She blends them together to create her pieces. Ames, E-A-M-E-S, I wish I could be certain how she pronounces that, founded Women Who Weld, a group of women welders who host an annual exhibition to showcase their welded art. This year marks the 5th exhibition. Ames, 62, first picked up a torch 7 years ago. She took a class at Metropolitan Community College's Fort Omaha campus with Peggy Ritchell. Ritchell, who lives in Crescent, Iowa, started the welded sculpture program nearly 21 years ago. She began with 1 course, then she was teaching 2, then 3, then she needed help. The program now has a group of instructors and a series of different courses. All the women in the Women Who Weld show have taken classes with Ritchell through the years. Ritchell, 70, said the gender split has always been even in her courses, even though welding is kind of a man's world. I think having a woman teaching probably makes women feel more comfortable, Ritchell said. Sharon Boynton, who will present in the Women Who Weld show this weekend, attended her first class with Ritchell 20 years ago. She was hooked. "I like metal because it's hard, and when I hit it, it hits me back," she said. Boynton, 60, was initially a painter, and she brings elements of her artistic past together with her present. The Omaha artist works in metal and glass and recently has been adding wood. That's all very out of the normal realm of what people usually think of as a woman's art medium, Boynton said. Ames said welding is an empowering way to create. There's a lot of strength in bending and moving such heavy materials into the structures you want. You're making things that last forever, Ames said.
Thanks, Deb. Well, before we go on now to markets and business, there's a birthday I noticed today, and I'm going to give this person's name, and I'm going to ask how many would remember this person in what roles. There's 2 roles that I remember this person playing. It's actress Eleanor Donahue. She's 79 today. Did you know, Deb?
No, I don't know.
Well, you remember the television show Father Knows Best?
I do.
She was Betty.
Oh.
Now, why do I remember that? I don't know. And I think she was one of Andy Griffin's dates back in Old Mayberry in those days. But anyway, so there you have it. Eleanor Donahue is 79 today.
Well,
it's 11:34, and I guess we're a little early, aren't we?
here I have a little article from Milan, Italy.
Oh,
Italian authorities have recovered 3 15th century paintings seized from an Italian Luxembourg noble family during World War II. Authorities on Monday unveiled the paintings, all by little-known artists, at the Brera Art Gallery in Milan, where they are now housed. The works were among property seized from the Bourbon-Parma family after Italy entered World War II, making Luxembourg an enemy state and allowing seizure of properties under wartime law. Many of the family's treasures were recovered by the U.S. military after the war, but not these paintings. Investigators for the Carabinieri State Police Unit, charged with protecting cultural heritage, only recently traced the works to 2 families in Milan who had inherited them. The works, which have not been valued, are in state custody after no living descendants could be traced.
Okay, well, I really don't have anything else here in this section.
Well, let's move on then to business.
Yep, and I have some 3 smaller items. One is a warning. The Omaha Public Power District is urging its customers to be wary of callers who pose as utility employees and demand payment of late bills. OPPD reported Monday that it had received dozens of reports of such calls by scammers. The calls, it said, typically begin with a caller telling OPPD customers that their bills are overdue. Customers are then asked to purchase a payment card and to call back and provide payment information to avoid having their electricity turned off. Fraudsters have been making similar calls for several years, the utility said, and have targeted utility customers locally and nationally. OPPD advised customers with any questions about billing or account information to call the utility directly at 402-536-4131 or 877-536-4131 if calling after hours. Governor Pete Ricketts expressed support Monday for the controversial proposed Costco chicken processing plant near Fremont. In response to a question on his monthly radio call-in show, the governor said opportunities to expand value-added agriculture are absolutely critical to Nebraska. The proposed plant offers a tremendous opportunity for local farmers to raise chickens for the plant or sell grain to the growers, he said. The plant can then process the chickens into products that can bring higher prices from consumers. Ricketts said he was glad that the identity of the company was now known and that supporters have started speaking out. He said it is important that corporations establish good communications with local people. The governor said Costco has a reputation for being a great corporate citizen and trying to create good working conditions. And here's another shorter article. This is good news, I think, for most of us, I hope. Energy companies led a broad rally in U.S. stocks Monday as investors shrugged off another slide in crude oil prices. The gain nudged the Dow Jones Industrial Average slightly above the 18,000 point mark for the first time since last summer, while the Standard & Poor's 500 index rose to the highest level in a year. The market had been headed lower following news that several major oil-producing nations failed to hammer out a deal to cut output. That sent the price of U.S. oil down 7% at one point before it recouped much of its losses. It ended down 1.4%. Investors also had their eyes on the latest company earnings, which have been mostly encouraging so far, said Sean Lynch, co-head of Global Equity Strategy at Wells Fargo Investment Institute. We're seeing broad-based gains across all the sectors, Lynch said. The market is maybe finding some resilience here and maybe looking back on the fundamentals of the earnings season and seeing it's not so bad. The Dow climbed 106.70 points or 0.6% to close at 18,004 0.16. The last time the average was above 18,000 points was on July 20. The S&P 500 index added 13.61 points, or 0.7%, to 2,094. That's the highest level since April 14 last year. The NASDAQ Composite Index gained 21.80 points, or 0.4%, to 4,960.02. For the year, the Dow is up 3.3%. The S&P is up 2.5%, and the NASDAQ is down 1%. Deb?
Thanks, Don. Here's a story about currency in the money section. A woman will get top billing, but on a $10 bill or a 20. From Washington, the Associated Press. Should Andrew Jackson, America's 7th president, be worried? Is it true that his days on the $20 bill may be numbered? At the moment, Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew is keeping details of his decision close to the vest, while promising that we're going to have an exciting set of announcements soon. Treasury officials refused to comment Monday on a report from CNN that Lew has decided to keep Hamilton as the portrait on the $10 bill and instead replace Jackson's portrait on the $20 bill with a woman who represents the struggle for racial equality. CNN, quoting a senior government source, said women also will be honored on the $10 bill, the denomination next up for redesign, with a mural-style depiction of the suffrage movement, which will replace the current drawing of the Treasury building. Lew did offer some hints about the decisions last week during an interview with CNBC. He stressed that the government would not be just redesigning the $10 bill, but also the $5 bill and the $20 bill. We're not just talking about one bill, Lew said. We're not just talking about one picture on one bill. We're talking about using the front and the back of the bill to tell an exciting set of stories. Lew suggested that it wouldn't be a woman's portrait on the $10 note. We're going to have a representation of the contribution women have made to our democracy on the next bill that's issued, he said. Last summer, Lew announced that the government was going to incorporate a woman on the $10 bill, which would be the first female portrait on U.S. paper currency in 100 years. Treasury received a tide of protests from Hamilton supporters and more than 1.5 million responses to Lew's request for suggestions. That prompted him to delay an announcement originally planned for the end of 2015. An online group, Women on 20s, has been campaigning to put a woman's face on the $20 bill. Jackson's critics say he should not be on U.S. currency because of the part he played in the relocation of American Indians. Susan Aids Stone, executive director of Women on the 20s, said although her group has been campaigning for the change, it is concerned that the result will be delaying the introduction of a woman on the currency for more than a decade. We think the projection of 2030 for issuing a new $20 bill is way too long, she said Monday. We don't understand why Secretary Lew can't fast-track production of the 20s. In a poll conducted last year by Women on 20s, Harriet Tubman, an African-American abolitionist and one of the leaders of the Underground Railroad, was the top vote-getter. Lew's initial announcement last year drew a storm of protests from fans of Hamilton. They argue that the founding father molded the nation's financial architecture and should not be removed from his place on the currency. Hamilton fans also get a boost from the hit Broadway musical Hamilton. Earlier this year, Lew was personally lobbied by the show's author and star Lin-Manuel Miranda. After their discussion, Miranda tweeted that Lew had assured him, "You're going to be very happy with the currency decision."
Thanks, Deb. Well, here's two brief items that are in the money section, but maybe they are making a comment more on the state of our economy and our spending. PepsiCo CEO Indra Nooyi said Monday the company is reshaping its product lineup to better reflect the growing interest in healthy eating and noted it has reduced its reliance on colas for sales. Nooyi's remarks came Monday after PepsiCo said its sales and profits slipped in its first quarter. And out of Las Vegas, tourists are spending more on their trips to Sin City, according to a new report by the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. Its visitor profile study showed average spending in most expense categories increased in 2015, and the average length of the stays inched up from 4.2 days in 2014 to 4.4 days for the record 42.3 million visitors last year. That's a lot.
Yes, it is. Well,
It's time for sports.
Turning now to sports. Big picture on the front page of the red-white game, I presume. Groundbreaking endeavor, it says. Newbie I-backs are encouraged by strides made in spring ball. Lincoln, the gaping crease through the heart of the Nebraska defense, didn't give Terrell Newby much of a choice on his first touch in Saturday's spring game. He'd accelerated to full speed before crossing the line of scrimmage. It's been a goal of Newby's this month, though. Even on the plays that aren't as exquisitely blocked as his 23-yard run to open Saturday's action, he's made it a point with each practice rep to heed the advice of his position coach and maximize the impact of his game-breaking speed. Find the running lane, then hit the gas. Just running hard, Newby said, having that mentality of staying north and south. It's one of the things that all the backs worked on throughout the spring. The results were on display Saturday, particularly in Newby's case. The 5'10", 200-pound senior, who had a strong showing all spring, made instinctive decisions as he secured each of his 6 handoffs. Then he let his physical gifts take over. Newby finished with 48 yards and a touchdown. Just remembering knee drive, Newby said, referencing his technique. Coach stresses it a lot. Running back, Coach Reggie Davis, told reporters on a couple occasions that he had been encouraged with Newby's progress. Same with the rest of NU's offensive staff. But no coach wanted to name Newby or anyone else the favorite to win Nebraska's #1 I-back job this spring. It's a 3-man race even after 14 practices and a spring game. It might be a 3-man race after training camp is complete, too. Coach Mike Riley has indicated that he's not opposed to splitting snaps between Newby and sophomores Divine Ozigbo and Michael Wilbon. Nebraska never seemed to settle on a clear #1 option last year either, although Newby ended up with the most carries. That's fine by Newby, who's been embracing the battle for playing time since last offseason. We just compete every day, he said. All of the running backs have great skill sets and can be utilized in all different ways. I think we're just making each other better every day. Newby isn't discouraged because he's aware of the areas in his game that need to be polished. Newby, banged up for part of 2015, finished last year with 765 rushing yards. It was the first time since 2008 that Nebraska has not had a 1,000-yard rusher, and it was the lowest total by the Huskers' top rusher since the 1975 season. The NU coaches expressed in media interviews that they were most concerned by the ground game's potential for negative or minimal gains last year, and the I-backs weren't providing much of a big play threat, so leaning on the rush attack wasn't always appealing. Nebraska finished with 21 rushes of 20 yards or more last year, ranking 50th nationally, but 14 of them came from non-tailbacks. Newby accounted for 5. Ozigbo had 2. They had 2 on NU's first drive Saturday. Newby rattled off an 18-yard gain just before he scored the game's first touchdown. Riley indicated after the game that the Huskers have figured out which play calls and blocking schemes best suit them. They'll analyze the playbook even further during the summer. I think we really have a better idea of these runs are going to work for us, Riley said. In fact, we made decisions right in the middle of practice to focus on this thing and put that thing on the back burner for now. Those are good decisions to be able to make, to say, let's become this. This is who we can be. Those decisions are in progress as we speak. In the meantime, Newby said he'll be focused on himself. Weight training and finals are at the top of his priority list until May. The team's summer conditioning program begins in June, as do Newby's extended drill work, exercises, and film room sessions. Newby knows that what happened this spring is only just the start, but he and the rest of the I-backs, who combined for 5.2 yards per carry, did enjoy their success Saturday. We've made a lot of good strides so far, and it showed a lot during the spring game, Newby said.
Well, let's hear what Tom Chattel, some of his comments today. He says, don't look now, but there's a special baseball season happening in Creighton, and it might get even better. Could the Jays host an NCAA regional at TD Ameritrade Park? Yes. The NCAA is on record saying it has no problem with a first weekend regional held on the field where the College World Series is played 2 weeks later. CU has to bid on it, and then the Jays have to go earn it. The latter is currently underway. Creighton is 25-7 with an RPI of 32. The Jays have yet to play a team in the top 50 RPI, but that will change this weekend at BYU, which is number 38. Unfortunately, tonight's game at Arkansas, who's 21-15, has a 128 RPI, is not the strength pill you would have expected. But every win counts, especially when you play in the Big East. It's hard enough to get an at-large bid playing in the Big East, much less think about a home regional. To wit, CU swept Butler, and its RPI went down 6 points. The Jays, an older team that knows how to win games, have put themselves in position going into the final 5 weeks of the season. They would likely have to win the Big East regular season title and the 14 Big East tournament in Aberdeen, Maryland, and get that RPI in the mid-20s to have a shot at hosting. The NCAA Baseball Committee might be intrigued with the idea of a regional in Omaha. There are a lot of baseball fans here, so they say. An interesting dynamic would be whether the NCAA would think the fans would show up a week after the Big Ten tournament is staged here. But for an NCAA event, you'd think they would. And then there's the matter of green grass. We talked about it. That's bidding, said Mark Burgers, CU Associate Athletic Director. The number one priority, we want the field to be perfect. When we started playing there, we agreed the first few years we would not bid on a regional. We want to be a good tenant. If this team keeps winning, CU must bid. Grass comes back every year. Life in the Big East means these opportunities don't. 4 defensive line lockers cleaned out. 2 defensive linemen thinking they are ready for the NFL. Another leaving as a graduate transfer for a fresh start. Another leaving the game of football. I'm not sure what the coaching staff could have done here. In today's college football and basketball, rosters flip quicker than ever. This, though, was even a bit much. And now the Oregon game just got a little scarier and more likely to be a shootout. Darren Erstad is no Yogi Berra or Casey Stengel, but his post-game quotes are fascinating. You can literally hear Erstad pushing the psychological buttons of his team. It's a fine line, scolding players' lack of approach in losses and yet trying to keep them up, embracing the challenge of finding out what they are made of. In Erstad's 5th season, he's still learning how to be a coach, teacher, motivator. He's approaching it like he did his baseball career, head first and every day. The 1991 Creighton baseball team was inducted into the CU Athletic Hall of Fame on Saturday, the first team to go in. And so I thought of a couple questions. What Jays basketball team should be inducted? The 2003 29 wins team, the 2014, that's Doug McDermott's senior year team, something from Red McManus or Eddie Sutton years. Would you wait until a team makes the Sweet 16? I'd love to know what Jays fans think. There are no teams in the Nebraska Football Hall of Fame. I suppose you would put all 5 national title teams in. Are there any others? This hall also includes small colleges in Nebraska. Are there any Nebraska small college teams that you would induct? I'd love to hear some thoughts here. Hey, it's April, but this is a fun topic. And finally, the Omaha Sports Hall of Fame has another big night planned on Thursday at 7 p.m. at the Scott Center with a class that includes Dana Altman, Ron Kellogg, Kerry Trotter, Jed Ortmeyer, Alice Schmidt, Grant Simmons, and the 1996 Creighton soccer team. I'm told Altman, however, will not be present due to a recruiting conflict. I hope it's not an Omaha thing. Altman has been gone long enough and had a lot of fans here rooting for him to make the Final Four last month. The city will always be indebted to the Creighton legend. That little arena down on 10th Street wouldn't be here without him. And those are some of Tom Chattel's comments today.
Thanks, Don. Here's a note about the Boston Marathon. Ethiopians nearly swept the Kenyans off the podium at the Boston Marathon on Monday, winning both the men's and women's races for the first time in history and taking 5 of the 6 spots on the victory stand. Lemi Berhanu Haley won the men's race in 2 hours, 12 minutes, 45 seconds, pulling away from defending champion Lalisa Desisa as they crossed over the Massachusetts Turnpike heading into the Kenmore Square. Haley won by 47 seconds, with Yamani Adhani Sege an additional 30 seconds back to round out an all-Ethiopian top 3. Atsede Baisa won the women's race, coming from 37 seconds behind with less than 5 miles to go. The 2-time Chicago Marathon champion finished in 2:29:19, 44 seconds, ahead of fellow Ethiopian Tifrit Segeye. Joyce Chepkirui was 3rd in the women's race, the lone Kenyan to medal in a race that had been dominated by her countrymen for decades. The results come as the World Anti-Doping Agency put Kenya on probation after more than 40 athletes tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs since the 2012 Olympics, nearly one a month. Al Sanabria, who went to high school in Minden, Nebraska, and ran at the University of Nebraska at Kearney, placed 25th in the men's race.
Well, here's some news from the National Football League. The New York Giants re-signed Pro Bowl place kicker Josh Brown. I think you remember that name. The Giants announced the signing on Monday, although Brown said he agreed to the deal last week. Contract terms were not immediately available. Brown, who played at Nebraska, scored a career-high 134 points, the 5th highest total in the NFL and the 4th highest total in Giants history. His previous best was 127 points with Seattle in 2007. And there's some other news. Running back Ronnie Hillman signed a 1-year contract to return to the Broncos. I know there's a lot of Broncos fans around here. The NFL Network reported the deal is worth $2 million and includes $600,000 in guarantees. Veteran defensive tackle Chris Jones was claimed off waivers by the Dolphins after missing last season because of an injury. And finally, although it's not here, I read elsewhere for you Packer fans, and I know there's a lot of you out there, Eddie Lacy is lost up to 20 pounds. There was a little problem with Eddie's weight last year. So this year, I'm hoping, we're all hoping, aren't we, that he'll be ready to go. Deb?
All right, here's some Major League Baseball notes. St. Louis Cardinals shortstop Ruben Tejada was activated from the 15-day disabled list after recovering from a strained left quadriceps, which he hurt in the last game of spring training. But he was on the bench Monday night against the Chicago Cubs with rookie Aledmus Diaz starting. Diaz was battling .406 with 2 homers and 8 RBIs. The 26-year-old Tejada figured to be the starter in place of Johnny Peralta, who is recovering from surgery to repair a torn ligament in his left thumb. Diaz and Jed Gyorko have both played well in the field and at the plate, and Garcia also started at shortstop. The door opened for Diaz, and what's there not to like about what he's done here, Matheny said. That was something we didn't necessarily anticipate. He needs to play.
Okay, well, Tyrone Lue, former Nebraska basketball player. Well, here's a quick article about him. Flanked by a security official, Tyrone Lue walked from Cleveland's locker room toward his first post-game press conference in the NBA playoffs. The former Nebraska star had nothing to fear. He had all the answers in acing his first test. The Cavaliers withstood a gritty Game 1 performance by the young and brash Detroit Pistons, who shot themselves to a 7-point lead early in the fourth quarter before Lou, making his postseason coaching debut, called a timeout, moved Kevin Love to center. Cleveland took off from there and rolled to a victory. Nice job, coach, a fan shouted at Lou. Just 15 more. And Tyron smiled. He's a good guy. I'm glad he's doing well in the NBA. And that's 12 o'clock, and that means our time is up. So for Don Van
And Deb 80.
We're off, and everyone have a great week. I think spring is really here.
I hope you're right.
I hope I just didn't jinx. So long, everyone.
Thank you very much, Don Van William and Deb 80, for doing a wonderful job that you always do.
That's my day. He listens in and knows when to come in.
Yeah.
He watches.
Today, and please do have a wonderful
What happens
week.
if you go over?
Pretty nice.
We don't. We just we're good like that. You smile. That's it.
We're just stopping in the middle of an article.
Yeah. Well, most of the times you can stop just about anywhere in most articles, and that's good enough.
Yeah. Well, I'm a Vikings fan. So.
Oh, geez. Glad I didn't know that before. You'd had to sit out there. I didn't know what I just thought I'd throw that. I was hoping it would turn by then.
So are you going on vacation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, enjoy yourself.
Oh, yeah. Always do. How's your headache?
It does. Usually the oral comes in and the headache comes in like an hour or two.
Oh, geez.
See you in a couple weeks then.
Yeah.
Thanks you guys for letting me sit.
Of course.
Oh, yeah. I know that you'll learn anything.
I sure did. I feel.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah. Do we just leave everything on?
Well, enjoy yourself, and we'll miss you.
Okay. I'll enjoy myself. I know that.
I know you will.
Yeah.
See you later.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. In June.
Are you
All right.
retiring? No, you're going to South Carolina.
No, I'm just going on vacation for a while. Oh, yeah. Yeah, thank you. All right, we'll see you, Sybil. And when do you have me coming back?
Yes. Oh, what?
When do you have me coming back?
Second week of June?
Okay.
Or earlier.
Or earlier? No. I'll probably be fired. I'm telling you. I'll probably be fired. I won't be able to get in the door,
Yeah, we'll just give you a place along. Nice to meet you.
Few weeks ago, I'll be gone. I'll be back in June. Be back with some new ones.
Well, I think I'm gonna start reading. I don't know, something may have happened. Okay, I have. 1:30, so, Okay. Thank you. Hi, how you doing? Maria, you want me to pick you up? Yeah, I can pick you up. All right. What?
want to join Outlook Nebraska for the 2016 Visually Impaired Community Resource Fair. Join us Saturday, April 30th from If you're dealing with vision loss or blindness, you'll want to join Outlook Nebraska.
Tony, let me set the levels right on now. I did it pretty carefully from here, and since it's exactly where it was and where it should be. So that's the way, that's a good goal. It splits. Those two areas, this is something better. So, still, pretty improved. I think the way it's improved is less. That's true. And I think there's no, that problem is a state. So they look, they hire a radio station broker and they assess the amount of county license. So it gets real hard.
By the way, got that PSA for the vision fair. It's in my folder. It's popular here, it's often you won't go down. You may have to convert, well, I tried, but you may have to convert it to a line.
Okay, all righty, thank you, sir. Look.
yourself. Have a good week. See you next week.
All right. I'm awful glad to see you. I'm so glad. You straight girl. Good to see you. That's very good.